Assalamualaikum and a very good Wednesday to everyone here. We are back. We are in IIUM TV right now. We hope that you are having a great Wednesday and you are going to have a better Wednesday after watching this show. So, my name is Arifuddin and I'm co-hosting with.
I'm Shaza.
And this is the new season of Political Insights, 40 minutes of political knowledge. So, to understand about the topic for today is that we want to see that there is quite a destabilization in the Middle East, right, Shaza?
Definitely, the Israel and Palestine conflict has taken over the world news yet again. So this time we want to take a different turn. We want to talk about it academically,
Yeah.
which is why today for our topic,
We're going to talk about attack against Palestine and the snowball effect of one event itself. So, we're going to talk about, and first and foremost, before we talk about our topic, we want to understand the actual situation, isn't it, Shaza?
yes, but let's not do that ourselves, which
Yeah.
is why we've invited our distinguished guest here, Dr. Olsi Jazexhiu. So, Doctor, Assalamualaikum, how are you doing?
Alaikum salam, I'm doing fine.
Are you excited to be with us?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'm sure to the viewers, Dr. Olsi is a very familiar face because our guest here is an assistant professor at the Department of History here in IIUM Gombak. Not only that, our guest is also a journalist whose expertise focuses on the Balkans, Eastern Europe, and even Muslims in China.
Mm-hmm. That's a really good, that's a really big portfolio to begin with, and to actually talk about this situation itself. So, before we're going to go through anything, we want to understand the situation. So, Doctor, can you please explain what is happening in Palestine? Because there are a lot of information in the internet, and there is probably a very big pool of information. So, there's a lot of distortion too. So, what is actually happening in Palestine?
Well, Palestine is probably one of the most unfortunate countries of the world where somebody can live in, because since 1917, when the British decided to sell Palestine to international Jews, Palestine has seen only fights, conflict, killing, massacres. And since when the British, they defeated the Ottoman Caliphate and they invaded Palestine, the native people of Palestine, which are the Muslims and Christians, they have been continuously targeted by first British and later Israeli colonialism. Jewish settlers who started to massively come in Palestine since 1917, to this day they are only stealing the land of native Muslims and Christians. They are killing them, they are deporting them.
Understandable. So, in the historical context, we can see that this issue is not, and what is happening in Palestine is not just started in 7 October.
Yeah,
Right, Shaza?
it's definitely, it's been happening again and again, but this time for October, suddenly it caught the world's attention in a scale that has never been seen before. So briefly, could you tell us what exactly were the events that led up to this blow up on Gaza's attack?
Well, what happened on October 7 is that a group of Palestinian fighters belonging to Hamas, they broke the siege that Israel has placed around Gaza Strip. Gaza Strip is a small piece of land, is probably, I mean, if I use the geography of Malaysia, it can extend from Port Dickson to probably somewhere in the border of Malacca, where in this space where you have 40 kilometers wide and the width is around 5 kilometers, you have 2.3 million mostly Muslims who live. These people, they are not allowed to trade with the world. They are not allowed to have their own state. They live they're surrounded by huge walls, and the Israeli regime kills them at will. So what happened on October 7 is that the Palestinian fighters who fight for their freedom, they broke the siege. They entered inside Israel. They killed and captured a number of Israeli settlers and soldiers. This thing provoked the state of Israel, because since its creation in 1948, Israel, which is supported by United States, Great Britain, and France, has been armed to the teeth. And in the four major Arab-Israeli wars that we had, in 1948, in 1956, in 1967, and in 1973, Israel has always prevailed thanks to the military support that it had received from the Western Alliance. And Israel has created a myth of superiority towards the Arabs. But what happened on October 7 is that the Palestinians, they broke this myth by breaking the Gaza siege, by attacking the military installations of Israel. They managed to destroy the southern Israeli command. And this was a huge blow to the image of Israel towards its Arab neighbors, but also in the West, because by having military superiority towards the Muslims, Israel had created this conviction that Israel is invincible. But a small guerrilla militia like Hamas is, it proved to the world that Israel is simply a paper tiger. And because Israel was humiliated in such a way, after the successful operation of Palestinian freedom fighters, Israel now is revenging back, supported by the Western Alliance, led by the United States, Great Britain, and France. Israel is simply massacring Palestinians. And for this, Israel has the total support of the West.
Understandable. So it's quite a grueling idea to begin with, because you're just in the size of the land is just around from Port Dickson and to Malacca. And
yeah, it hosts 2.3 million people.
And they're battering like it's a whole state.
Yeah.
So it comes to the question, Doctor. Even in such a sense, a lot of massacre is happening in Palestine. We have here in 2012 itself, Palestine was given the status of non-members or non-member and observer state in the United Nations, and itself it suggests that even some countries do not view it as a state to begin with, especially some of the West. So what are the effects for Palestinians if this happens?
Well, I mean, the Jewish project, the British and Jewish project, from its inception in 1917, aimed to get rid of the native Palestinians and to turn the Ottoman mutasarrifat of Quds, to turn it into a state for European Jews. Now, what has happened is that when, after the Second World War, the United Nations, with the support of the Soviet Union and the United States, they declared the creation of State of Israel. In the time, the UN agreed that in this space we should have two states, one for the native Muslims and Christians, which we call them nowadays as Palestinians, and another state was to be allocated to the Jews. But what has happened that since 1948 to 1956 to 1967, Israel has continuously refused to accept the right of the Palestinians to have their own state. And the Western Alliance, or the alliance which is backed by the United States, they continue to sabotage and to not allow their Western allies to recognize Palestine as an independent country.
Understandable. So it can be seen here that basically, Doctor, all of the noise is moving away from Palestine is because that the Western Alliance are out against it. Basically, the huge powers against it. That's the
Yes.
general answer, right?
Yes.
So
It's very clear on whose stand they take against, and it doesn't matter about the massacres or genocide that's clearly happening in Palestine, even though they will turn their head the moment something like that happens in Europe, let's say.
that's true.
It's very hypocritical of them, I would say.
Indeed.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of the basics, and I'm sure the viewers have understand like what actually caused this event, especially on October 7. It's like it's very different from all the previous attacks that's happening in Gaza, because for once the Palestinians have the upper hand for now.
And it's understandable that it's not just because what happened just before 7th of October. It's basically contextually it's been building up for a long time.
Yep. Well, to the viewers, I'm sure you guys are excited to know more about the ripples of this event. We've covered all the basic premises. Now you guys have understand the context behind this war. So we'll dive deeper into this after a short commercial break. But don't go anywhere. Gather your thoughts, gather yourself, get a cup of coffee. Be right back with you in 2 minutes.
See ya.
That's what it is.
Assalamualaikum everyone. Welcome back to our discussion. I hope you guys are ready. I hope you guys have gathered your thoughts, and let's dive into a deeper discussion.
So Shaza, we've already understood what is happening in Palestine and the basics basically in the form of historical context and academically, not just based on social media. So right now, Shaza, we're going to get deeper into the Israeli and Palestinian issue by understanding the technicalities. So, Doctor, so we have one question about technicality, which is Article 12 of the 1949 Geneva Conventions protects hospitals from being attacked to begin with. At the same time, it suggests that what Israel just did a few days ago is by bombing a hospital in Gaza makes it illegal, internationally illegal, made by the laws, most of it by the West. So, what is your point of view regarding this matter?
Well, Israel has been breaking the international law not only when they bombed a hospital in Gaza, they're bombing everyday hospitals. They're massacring civilians, they're bombing buildings, schools, universities. And by the way, the Israeli regime has killed even a number of Palestinians who were educated in IUM. One of them, I think, was the director of the Islamic University in Gaza, who was an alumni of IUM. So they're breaking every kind of international law. And unfortunately, the law doesn't work when it comes to Israel. Why? Because those people who build the international law, the United Nations, they created the Security Council. And the Security Council, we have these 5 permanent members with a veto power. And always when members of the United Nations would want to have the international law be implemented, Americans, the British, and the French, they are going to use their veto power, and they will shield and protect Israel. On the other hand, we have a number of international institutions, like the International Court of Justice and others, which are based in Europe. But if you see these international courts, they target people from Asia, from Africa, or even from Russia. The International Criminal Court of Justice, they recently charged the president of Russia, Vladimir Putin, with war crimes. But when it comes to the Israeli leaders, they do not dare to. Why? Simply because the Americans who have created these institutions, they do not allow these international bodies to implement the law. Why? Because America is afraid from Israel. Why is America afraid from Israel? Because Zionist groups, they control the major sources of US economy. The banks, the corporations, I mean, from YouTube and Google, where we are broadcasting now, to Amazon and to many other, or the Gmails that we use, and the major platforms that we use on internet are run by Zionist or Israeli supporters. The major international and local medias in the United States, from Fox News to the CNN, are owned by Jewish oligarchs. And these people who control the power in the United States, they have turned somehow United States into a colony of Israel. And what happens is that the United States, it uses its military and economic power to blackmail the rest of humanity. And we have the Israeli leaders who commit crimes against humanity. They go and kill civilians. They butcher babies. And the law doesn't work because the other major world powers, like Russia or China, who are superpowers and could challenge the United States, they are not willing to go to war against the United States for the sake of the Palestinians. And when it comes to the Muslim world, Muslim countries today, they are weak, they are divided, they live under the blackmail and threats of the Americans in particular, and they do not dare to do anything to defend their Palestinian brothers and sisters.
So we can make a summary that from the answer itself, American hegemony and same European hegemony and a lot of interest within America and Israel itself. So that's why the international law does not work on them. So
and let me correct something into what you summarized. Europe probably must not be included into this equation. Why? Because there are many European countries, governments, who are not friendly to Israel. And I mean, in Europe, the feeling of anti-Israel, against Israel is huge. But what happened is that after the collapse of the Soviet Union, the Americans have managed in a way to put all the Western Europe under their control. And especially now with the war against Russia in Ukraine. And even though the European public and many European politicians, they want to see Israeli leaders be charged as war criminals. And we have to remember something, that the continent which suffers most from the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, apart from the Islamic world, is Europe. Because the majority of the refugees, which nowadays are going from the Middle East, from Iraq, from Syria, from Libya, countries which United States destroyed on behalf of Israel, most of these refugees, they end up in Europe. They end up in Germany.
True. Understandable. Thank you for the additional info, Doctor. We appreciate that.
Yep.
Basically understanding even more what is actually happening, not just in Europe and also in America. So Shaza?
Well, so I think we've understand that none of these countries, even though they are lending military aids and such to Palestine and Israel, none of them want to risk it for another world war, because it's such, to them, it probably is a small issue that they're not willing to be part of. Is that correct?
No, look, European governments, they are blackmailed by the Americans to side with Israel. While the Muslim countries, they are also blackmailed by the Americans. And we have countries from Indonesia to Turkey, who time after time, they are blackmailed. They are even put under sanctions by the Americans when they support the Palestinians. So we have the United States on one hand, which uses its military and economic power to blackmail and threaten the rest of the planet not to do anything about resolving the Israeli massacre against Palestinians.
I think it's very unfortunate that they have such a big power and influence to the rest of the world, honestly.
But in terms of blackmailing, there's also an instance that within a certain region in the Middle East, between 1979 to 2020 itself, 5 countries in the region had established diplomatic ties with Israel. So what have inclined them to do? Is it also because of the blackmailing or another shared interest within the Middle East region?
Well, we have a number of countries which have established diplomatic relations with Israel. One of them was Egypt. Egypt, what they did is that after the Yom Kippur War, where Israel was defeated in a way by Egypt, of 1973, Egyptians came to a conclusion that they could not continue their war with Israel because, like happened in 1973, the Americans and the French, they attacked Egypt. So they knew that if we continue our war with Israel, it means we're doing a war against the United States. So Egypt, for geostrategical reason, it decided to establish relations with Israel. But what happened during the year 2020, when we had Donald Trump as the president of the United States, Trump, whose administration was surrounded by Zionist evangelical Christians and who was more Zionist than Netanyahu, he blackmailed a number of Arab Muslim countries like Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Morocco, and Sudan to, in a way, normalize their relation with Israel. The Trump administration, they blackmailed the Emirates and the Saudis and the Bahrainis because you see, I mean, especially in these Gulf countries, you don't have democracy. And these ruling elites, they are afraid about their power. So what Americans have done with these countries since 1979, when we had the Islamic Revolution in Iran, they threaten these Arab countries and they tell them, look, if we don't support you dictators to remain in power, you'll have a revolution and you'll have democracy. And these Arab dictators, they don't want democracy. And for this reason, Americans tell them, look, if you want us to keep you in power, you have to be friend to Israel.
Understandable. So there's a lot of taking. You won't really learn this in some of the political science classes, so that's why we have Dr.
But
here.
you have to take our history classes, and inshallah you are going to learn them. If you take my class on Muslim nations in contemporary history.
Oh, maybe we should next
Maybe we
semester.
next
You should,
semester.
and your viewers, I would advise them to take this class because we analyze all these stories in detail there.
I see.
Understandable. So
Well, I think we've understand most of the ripple of the events. We've uncovered a lot, especially on the Western countries, their ties with Israel and where we stand against them. Well,
So,
Arif?
one thing I know, I'm going to take history class next semester.
History class.
All right, so everyone, I understood some of the past, what is happening within the Palestinian conflict, the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. So we're going to go to another commercial break. Don't go away. Sit at the edge of your seat, and we'll see you again. See you in a little bit. All right. Okay. Bye bye.
Dia bercakap, nak you. That's what.
Take that.
Hello, welcome back to Political Insights, 40 minutes of political knowledge. So, we can understand what is actually happening in Palestine already. At the same time, we understand a few bits of the technicalities that are happening in Palestine. So, we want to go a little bit deeper into some of the parts of the technicalities and maybe what is to hope about Palestine. Shaza?
Well, just now our guests have explained to us about the pressures that the world are facing from the blackmailing of the Western states and even Israel themselves. So, regarding the recent events, we know that Malaysia has received 3 demarche letters from the United States because we chose to stand in solidarity with Palestine. What are exactly your thoughts on this?
Well, the pressure of the U.S. government against Malaysia are in line with what Americans do globally against any country which stands with the Palestinians. So we have countries from Turkey to Qatar to Malaysia to Indonesia who receive such demarches from the Americans. And this follows the logic of what I was explaining before, that the Americans, they go against any country which stands for the rights of the Palestinians. Now, countries like Malaysia, like Turkey, like Qatar, who in a way are somehow allies of the United States for different geopolitical reasons, I mean, you don't feel the heat. But there are other countries, like, for example, Iran, which is under total sanctions, and the country is being devastated by the Americans because they support the Palestinians. And before this, in the 1990s and in the year 2000s, Americans, they have gone to war against different Arab countries who were supporting Palestinians. We can mention here Iraq. Iraq was destroyed because Iraq was supporting the Palestinians. Syria was born because it was supporting Hamas. Libya of Muammar al-Gaddafi was destroyed because al-Gaddafi, he was supporting the Palestinians. So, I mean, Americans, they are very brutal when it comes to defending Israel. And any country which shows even some kind of sympathy towards Palestine, like his example of Malaysia, they get blackmails and threats.
Well, considering the recent event, we've seen that in Malaysia and all over the world, people have resorted to boycotting companies that they see are related to Israel. So how much does this actually help Palestine, and is it worth the negative effects?
Well, I do not know how I can answer to this because, okay, I mean, boycotts, when people boycott, let us say, Coca-Cola or whatever, is some kind of pressure for these Western corporations. But in the long term, it does not help. Why? Because, I mean, okay, you can boycott Coca-Cola and you can boycott McDonald's. For how long will your boycott last? For 1 month, 2 months? And after that, and I mean, these international, especially American companies, they have their markets not only in the United States and not only in the Muslim world, but throughout the planet. So I think, yeah, boycotting is good. I mean, it shows a kind of solidarity. For example, many Muslims are boycotting McDonald's because they're supporting Israeli soldiers. But I mean, the solution for the Palestinian issue must come politically. I mean, the Muslim countries with the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, they must come together. They must not fear the Americans, and they must tell to them, look, I mean, if you don't stop the massacre and the genocide and the Holocaust, which Israel is doing at present against the Palestinians, you are going to have diplomatic and political problems with the Muslim world. Unfortunately, Muslim countries, they are disunited and they do not do this.
Well, that's something that we can't really disagree on. And about the boycott, that was definitely challenging our own views, considering it's the norm to boycott these countries.
To boycott, but by right, economically, probably does not
That's
help as
right.
much in the long term, just as Doctor said. So, Doctor, in terms of the one of the methods to actually solve, if not just tone down what is happening currently in Palestine, some of the scholars suggested that one of the most common suggestion is that for long-term solution is a two-state solution with one state of Palestine and one state of Israel. So we would like to understand, is this realistically possible, or is it even politically good to do?
Well, this is possible, but Israeli regime, they have continuously refused them. I mean, the Sunni Arab countries of the Gulf, led by Saudi Arabia, a few years ago, they even offered to Israel to normalize their relation on exchange of for Israel to create a Palestinian state. But the problem is that inside Israel itself, especially since after the Oslo Accords, when in the time Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin he signed with Yasser Arafat the Oslo Accords, according to which we would see the creation of two states, one for the Arabs and another for Jews. But extremist groups inside Israel, they assassinated Rabin. So the problem comes today from Israel, because the Arab and Muslim countries are ready. They're ready to accept Israel as a reality, but they have offered to Israel so many things, so many deals, and only to in a way convince the Zionists to allow the Palestinians to have their own state. But the Zionists, they don't want, because they believe in their biblical theology, according to which, I mean, Israel should invade all the Middle East, from river Nile to river Euphrates. So for the Zionists, they do not even recognize the existence of Syria and of Iraq, and in their theology, they want to create what is this called the Eretz Israel, or the natural, or the big Israel. And for them, Islam and the Arabs, they have no place in the Middle East. So their enmity is not only against the Palestinians, but is even against the Syrians, the Lebanese, the Iraqis.
So that's quite a big understanding of what
Yeah.
understand what is Israel actually doing, because we often hear that what Israel is doing just for its own sake, but rather it just also want to bring in all the other Middle East and also engulf it too.
Yep. Well, talking about Palestine, it's being recognized, not recognized. It's apparent that there's various options that people take to show their support for Palestine. And I don't know if you're aware, but I think you are. Do you recognize this watermelon?
No, I don't.
Oh, okay. Well, on social media, it's been trending because people are using this watermelon emoji as a way of showing support. So, what do you think exactly is the symbolism behind this? But you've never seen it.
I have no idea. You have to explain to me. I mean, I'll fail if you give that to me as an exam question. I'm very bad at it.
Do you care to explain?
I mean, by right to begin with, it's actually because a lot of Palestinian flags are being banned online by most of the Zionist-controlled media. So basically, they use the watermelon as an idea of the Palestinian flag. So yeah,
it's the colors, I think.
Yeah, basically, it's the colors that represent the black, white, and green. So, Shada, we're going to continue our next question.
Well, before we wrap this up, personally, you as a journalist, and you're very informed about this, what are your hopes for Palestine? And how would you like the matter to be resolved?
Well, look, Muslims, we lost Palestine in 1918 in the war, and something that you lose in the war, you cannot win it except by fighting back. So for as long as the Muslim world will be disunited as it is today, it will be weak, it will be dominated by the West. There is no hope for Palestine. I mean, unfortunately, our Palestinian brothers and sisters, they're going to go from bad to worse. The Muslim Ummah is divided, is hopeless. Muslims, very often, they hate each other. And we have to get back to our tradition, to the Sunnah of our Prophet, to the Quran, and to understand that the Palestinian issue does not belong only to the Palestinians, but belongs to all of us, to the Malays, to the Albanians, to Europeans, to Americans, and to all humanity after all, because Palestinians, apart from being our Muslim brothers and sisters, they are human beings as well. They have the right to exist, they have the right to live in peace, they have the right to have their own state. But unfortunately, the present international system is evil, is bad. So probably if we see another world war in the coming years, and if we see the collapse of the US hegemony, we might hope for a change in Palestine and for the liberation of the Palestinian people, or otherwise, if Allah decides to make a mujiza, like he sent Hazrat Musa to the Egyptians to liberate the Beni Israel, if Allah brings to Muslims Imam Mahdi, like we believe in many of our hadiths, to liberate the Muslims from the yoke of Zionism.
Well, I'm sure that. Thank you for the information. Thank you for the exchange. That was very informative. And some of it, to me personally, I think it might sound harsh, but to the people who are trying to understand this topic, we need a reality check on the reality.
Understandable. And doctor is here to give us that.
Yep.
So we like
Thank you very much. We really appreciate having you here. And for the viewers, I hope you guys have gained a lot from this session because this is, after all, a topic that is dearly close to our hearts. But before you leave, I just want to say, don't forget to subscribe to all of our social media, IIUMTV on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, TikTok, and
most importantly, YouTube that we are streaming to right now. Subscribe to IIUM TV because we have a lot more shows other than also political insights. So, Shaza, are we going?
Yep.
All right. So, before we end, I would like to end with a quote. So, it is true about the Palestinians that their homes may shatter, but fret not as Allah oversees. But as promised in the end, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. All right. Thank you guys for having us in Political Insights. 40 minutes of political knowledge. We'll see you next week, inshallah. Assalamualaikum and have a very good night, everyone. We see you next week. Bye-bye.